Joining us tonight, and thank you to your daughter Maddie for joining us as well. We are excited to have you. I'll give a little bit of an introduction to start us off. So my name is Nikki Berkey. I'm president of the Ohio Middle Level Association, and I wanted to welcome all of you to OMLA's virtual PD opportunity this evening. We are excited to have you join us tonight. And in just a little bit, we'll hear from Dr. Jason Fine, principal at Jones Middle School in Upper Arlington, about his journey with Tourette's. And Dr. Fine, like I said, thank you again for your willingness to share your knowledge and story with us tonight. So we're very appreciative of that. In addition to tonight's session, I also wanted to let you know that we have 2 additional virtual professional development opportunities scheduled for later on. The first one is March 24th, and that is also at 7 p.m. And the second one is April 20th, and also at 7 p.m. And both of those sessions are with Dr. Sierra Austin, and she will be sharing with us some diversity sessions. So if you saw on the rolling slides prior to this session started, there's a little bit of an introduction of some sessions that she'll be talking to us about. And you can also see additional information about those sessions on our social media posts and additional emails that will be coming out to you soon. So we're looking forward to having her join us as well. As many of you may have already heard, we changed our annual conference date. We moved that back yet again from March 4th and 5th to May 6th and 7th. So we are excited to have that May date and looking forward to a great conference at the Kalahari Resort and Conference Center, and hoping that you will be able to join us. Those breakout sessions are really presented by many practicing teachers. So there's a wonderful array of sessions and variety of sessions available to you. In addition to our keynote, who will be Weston Kieschnick on both Thursday and Friday of those days. And Jack Berkmeyer will be our featured presenter. So we're looking forward to having both of those join us for the annual conference as well. On a side note, we're already looking forward to our 2021 conference, which is October 28th and 29th. Actually, I don't have those dates exactly in front of me. I think they're the 28th and the 29th of 2021. And we are currently accepting award nominations for our many awards. So if you have outstanding colleagues, an outstanding team, outstanding school, I want to say project, but I'm not looking for component awards, advisory, teaming, support staff, parent of the year. We also offer nominations for, as well as student of the years. So many award opportunities, and I would encourage you to check our website for those various award nomination opportunities, because there are many of them available. So, and the deadline for the award nominations for 2021 is March 8th. So that date will be quickly approaching. So I would encourage you to check those out. Without really delaying this session any longer, I wanted to give a quick introduction to Dr. Jason Fine. And Jason Fine is an inspirational speaker that draws on his deep understanding and expertise in child development and his own incredible story. Jason speaks from the heart about living through adversity, the importance of finding your motivation, and the support he's found from family, friends, and mentors, which allowed him to refuse to accept this destiny and thrive as an educator and athlete. He received his undergraduate degree from Ohio University, and he fulfilled his dream of playing Division I football. Jason has since spent 20 years in public education, earning multiple awards as a teacher, coach, and principal at the elementary and middle school levels. He is currently the principal at Jones Middle School in Upper Arlington, Ohio. And Jason recently earned his doctoral degree from Miami University in 2020. So congratulations, Dr. Fine. Jason lives in Upper Arlington with his wife, his 2 daughters, and 2 dogs. And accompanying Jason today is his daughter, Madeline Fine, who is a National Tourette Association Youth Ambassador. So thank you for joining us as well, Madeline. Madeline is a junior at Upper Arlington High School and is a member of the Upper Arlington varsity tennis team. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Fine and his daughter Madeline, and let them share his story with you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Appreciate everyone being here this evening. We also want to thank OMLA. We love the resources that OMLA continues to offer the folks in education. Love the upcoming virtual supports that you're providing. So thank you so much. We're not going to take a ton of time. We know this is a crazy time of the year. We know that many of you are just trying to process day in and day out how to support your kids the best, how to continue to love and care and be compassionate. So we just want to share a little bit about our journey through the last probably for me, the last 35, 40 years. And then I want Maddie to share a little bit about Tourette syndrome and a little bit about her journey. So my journey starts probably when I was in the 5th grade. So, and a little bit into middle school. So a little bit of the world that we all live. My mom took me to the doctor because I had some things that needed attention. I had some things going on in my body that just didn't seem right. My parents were confused. So after working with a neurologist that I had just met hours earlier, the doctor sat me down, he sat my mother down, and he told me that kids like you typically do not go on to college, and they certainly will not play sports. And I know what you're thinking. That's impossible when I look at the studly man of a beast in these pictures at the time when this conversation was happening. There's no way a doctor could tell this kid that he would not go on to play sports and do other things that he was passionate about. But that's exactly what happened. So why that occurred is that day, as I mentioned, I was at the neurologist. And the neurologist, as you know, studies the brain. And that day, the doctor diagnosed me with something called Tourette syndrome. Tourette syndrome is defined as a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary tics and vocalizations. So things that I cannot control from my body movements and also vocalizations. Many people, especially in my generation, there's lots of stigmas around Tourette syndrome, lots of jokes, lots of things from social media, mainstream media that really makes light of Tourette syndrome. And I do it as well. If I can't laugh at myself, then I'm not going to be able to function as a happy person, especially in a middle school world. But I feel like there's no better way for folks to kind of get a true flavor of what Tourette syndrome is without hearing from kids. So I always borrow this from HBO and the Tourette Syndrome Association. Just a brief video. Give me a thumbs up, Rob Gonda, if sound works once I play it. It's just an opportunity for you to hear from kids what it's like living with Tourette's.
Tourette syndrome is a certain brain defect, snapping all the time. Do a lot of things people wouldn't like. Metal! They like come all the time. It's there. Why do you have to make fun of it? They just think I'm real crazy. The person who has Tourette's isn't like a whole another person. Like me. I'm a regular kid. It feels weird. Because I'm in control of everything else. Why aren't I in control of that? Why can't I stop myself from doing that? Holding them back. Didn't mean to. If my hand twitches really bad, I just hold it down on like a table and just take deep breaths or something and just try to make them stop. It's like they're like it's like an itch. Like you have to like scratch it. You just do it.
So hopefully, I think the volume was a little iffy on that, but you could see some of the main components of that. And it's hard for someone with Tourette syndrome to watch it because as you see people with tics and you hear people with tics, it causes yours to be a little bit more at the front of your brain and struggle to see some of those. But luckily, as I was going through this, I had an incredible family, and I had a family that taught me to be proud of who I was. It was tough growing up in the 80s, being different and being unique. But the one thing my parents taught me right out of the gates was how to face adversity. And one of the earliest forms of adversity that I faced was seeing my mother in a Schlitz beer t-shirt at an Olin Mills photo shoot. So we learned at an early age what it's like to deal with adversity when you look like this as a family. But luckily, my family said, we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you have what you need. You should never apologize for who you are, what you do. We're going to go out of our way and make sure that everybody you come in contact with knows about Tourette syndrome so that you don't have to answer to it. And that's great. And I feel like you all live that every day in a school setting where you have families that are working to provide us with information. But it's what we do with that information as educators that's really important. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of some scenarios that happened in my life that I think really define me as to who I am. And I'm going to take you back to my 7th grade science teacher, my favorite class, my favorite teacher. He was also my football coach, my favorite football coach. I'm sitting in his class. My mother had already communicated with him, the other teachers, our school counselor. They'd had several meetings. So he was well aware. He'd already coached me in football. He knew exactly who I was. Halfway through the class, one day out of nowhere, he stops the class and he says, "Why do you keep acting like that?" And he did it with a laugh. He did it with a smirk. And it was not a good moment for me. I was humiliated. I was unable to answer. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. And I could not explain it. I didn't have the skill set at that time to advocate as to what Tourette syndrome was. I couldn't answer, but I had 2 buddies that were sitting beside me. I'll never forget it. Doug Hefner, who's on the left of your screen. Mark Wallace, who's on the right of your screen, who I later played football with, was my quarterback. Those 2 young men who were also athletes on this guy's team, they stood up and they said, "Jason has something called Tourette syndrome. He cannot help what he's doing. He cannot control it." And that was a big moment. Those 2 kids showed up for me and they stood up and advocated to an adult at a time when I could not. It didn't matter. The teacher asked me to pack up my belongings and head into the science closet so that I was no longer a distraction to the rest of the classroom. So I spent the rest of the time in the science closet isolated. I'll fast forward to my junior year. Remember, the doctor said, "You're not going to college. You're not going to play sports." So every day I really worked hard to make sure that we battled that type of mindset, and I wanted to play sports. So here I was as a junior playing varsity basketball. We're playing our crosstown rivals in a basketball game. It was a packed gym. I came out of the locker room for warm-ups. I'm leading the team. And as I turned the corner, dribbling around the gym, every student, and we're talking hundreds of students, like you would see at a rivalry game here in Columbus, every student in the student section had a handmade t-shirt that said things along the lines of, "See Jason Fine, see Jason Fine play basketball, see Jason Fine twitch and shout uncontrollably, don't be a Jason Fine." Every time I touched the ball, they chanted and made fun of my Tourette's. Every time I came out of the game, they chanted. They wanted me back in so they could continue with the barrage of chaos. Their mascot, as I'm throwing the ball in bounds, we have footage of their mascot mocking me and making movements, mocking my Tourette's, and then kids on the floor were doing the same. So that game occurred on a Friday night. And on Sunday morning, there was an article in the Dayton Daily newspaper about my Tourette's. And so here's the beauty of that. And I talk about reflection all the time. So Sunday, there's an article explaining that I have Tourette syndrome and explaining a little bit why I act the way I do. That Monday morning, I came to school. And on Monday morning, my principal comes and pulls me out of my classroom. Principal escorts me to the gym. And as I get to the gymnasium, every player from the opposing team that we played was sitting in the gymnasium for a public apology for me. And so I never tell this story because I'm angry at the school and the other things that occurred. I tell it because those guys and the coaches and the administrator showed up. They could have easily accepted, we were unkind. But once they learned that I had Tourette syndrome, and they didn't really understand what it was until the article came out, they faced the apology and they came in. And I'm actually really good friends with one of the folks that actually helped create the t-shirts. He and I went on to play football together in college. but I'm very appreciative that they reflected and were able to own up to it. My issue is this: it shouldn't take a diagnosis for someone to have compassion. So just because we find out, oh, you had Tourette's, that's why you act that way. The Tourette's shouldn't have been the defining moment for the apology. The apology is because perhaps we treated someone unkindly or unfairly. But I am always appreciative that they answered the bell and they did provide an apology, which I greatly appreciate. Also received letters, as you see. My third story takes me to OU, the greatest college of all time, the Ohio University. I see Rob Gonda shaking his head. He knows. But here I was. I fought my entire career to stay, to prove the doctors wrong. Wanted to play college football. Wanted to go to college and get my degree so I could get out and do things like I'm doing today. And I was doing that. And I want to tell you a story about my first quarter at OU. Here I am. I've defied the odds. I'm sitting in a large lecture hall, and halfway through the class, for whatever reason, my tics must have been completely out of control. Halfway through the class, the professor stops the class, and the professor says, "I don't know why you keep acting that way, but you need to stop." So here I am. I'm a freshman in college. I'm trying to defy the odds, and I've got a professor that's upset with how I'm behaving. Clearly, I've got some vocal tics going. I've got some physical motor tics going. And so when you try to focus, as you saw in the video, when you try to focus, it's tougher to control your tics. So it gets a little worse. A few minutes later, the professor stops class again, and she says, "I've told you once, I'm not going to tell you again. You need to pull it together." Now, keep in mind, my dad had also communicated with my professors prior to. I had written a couple letters to my professors in emails explaining who I was, what I had, but here's another example where it really didn't matter. So now I'm working as hard as I can. I'm sitting in the back of the room. Everybody's looking at the goofy kid in the back, and I always sit in the back of the room because that's where I'm not a distraction to other kids. And that's at church, that's in seminars, that is wherever I am, you'll find me in the back of the room. Clearly, I'm not able to control myself. And at towards the end of the class, the professor says, "That's it, pack up your stuff and get out of my lecture." So here I am, my freshman year. I finally have made it. I'm in my first class, and I've got two choices to make. I can take the advice of the doctor and prove the doctor right, pack up my stuff and exit the campus because they were right. I was unique and had challenges that I wasn't able to overcome, and I could prove those doctors wrong. Or I could take the advice of my parents, which is exactly what I did. And I'm thankful that they always built us up to be proud of who we were. And they taught us to advocate for ourselves. And I will say I'm proud that that is the first time I ever advocated for myself, especially to an authority figure. And as a result, I went outside. I waited for the professor to come out. We had a very respectful and passionate conversation, very tearful. I'm proud to say I got an A in the class, but I'm also proud to say that it also led to lots of adversity that was faced, and it provided a lot of things. And these three examples are just a couple of examples of dozens of times me being isolated and judged, but all those instances created an opportunity for me to succeed and to push forward. And I'm proud to say that I was able to graduate from the Ohio University. I did play college football, did earn a varsity letter, but like I said, that's not what defines me. I don't look at that and say, oh, I wanted to be an athlete and I wanted to graduate college. There's a lot more that I wanted to do to make sure that the doctor truly understood his impact of his words that day. As Nikki mentioned, I did just recently graduate from Miami University. And a lot of people look at it, I've got an incredible job. I feel like I work at the greatest place with the greatest kids, with the greatest staff members and parents and community. And people say, that's awesome. What a great success story. And I want to tell you that I'm very proud of the work, but the success story takes a little twist. And the twist is, I'm lucky to say that I've got a superstar sitting here with me, and that's Maddie Fine. And Maddie Fine is my hero because Maddie Fine too has Tourette syndrome. Tourette syndrome is genetic. And so you work your whole life to overcome Tourette syndrome. And then the agony occurs soon after little Maddie was born. I knew right away that Maddie had Tourette's. But luckily, my family and friends and great teachers along the way taught me how to handle my Tourette syndrome. And so I'm thankful to hopefully have worked with Maddie and provide her with a little different experience than some of the experiences that I've had as I went through. So I'm gonna toss this over to Maddie. Maddie's gonna share with you what her diagnosis was like, and then she's gonna share some facts about Tourette syndrome. And then we'll wrap things up here and we'll take any questions that we may have. So I'm gonna pass it over to my hero, little Maddie Fine.
Hi, I'm Maddie, and I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when I was in 2nd grade. And my diagnosis is a little bit different than my dad. My doctor asked me what I was passionate about, and I told her dance, tennis, and other stuff. And so she got on her knees to my level and told me that I was going to do all of those things and more, and that I have Tourette syndrome, but that is not going to stop me from being successful. And over the years, I've had a variety of different tics between motor and vocal. Some of my main vocal tics have been a squeak like noise, a snort. I've had one where I clear my throat. I've had a humming noise. And then some of my motor tics have been, I clench my stomach muscles. I stretch my neck sometimes, itch my hands. But the tics aren't just everything. It's only the tip of the iceberg. And many people with Tourette syndrome struggle with other disorders. For me, it's OCD and anxiety, but for others, it could be depression and ADHD. And it oftentimes becomes a cycle. If your tics are really bad, then your anxiety or something else is really bad, and vice versa. So it becomes a big cycle that you have to control when things get rough. And I have found many different ways to manage my tics, and it is different for everybody. I have different coping strategies than my dad, but it's just different for everybody. One thing that has helped is medication, and I am on a medication right now that is actually for blood pressure for adults, but somehow it stops my tics, and it has greatly helped me. But some people, their bodies just don't work with the medicine or different types of medicine, and it hasn't done anything. I also, shortly after my diagnosis, I went through cognitive behavioral therapy, where I worked with a therapist on coping strategies. And two that have really stuck with me is I'm able to switch my tics. So if I have a tic that is really disruptive or painful, whenever I feel that urge to tic, I try to move it to a different part of my body. So if my tic is a snort, then I'm going to try to move it to a noise where I clear my throat because it's less distractive. Also, I've learned how to count in between my tics because I try to get a different amount of time in between each tic. So like 9, then 10, just to start slowing down the process of my tics. Also, we have found nutrition and eating good and sleeping good has really helped. There have been times where my tics have been acting up, and after a good night's rest or some good sleep, everything is better. Also, educating others. The more people that know, the easier it has been for me and for others with Tourette syndrome. I've had people make comments, adults, kids, stares, but I found that educating and advocating for myself has really helped, which is why I decided to be a Tourette syndrome youth ambassador. And so I was chosen to go on Capitol Hill in 2018. And I was able to speak out asking for help for funding and for research. Another big thing is supportive teachers and supportive family and friends. It has been super easy going to school and having all my teachers support me. Before each school year, I normally send out an email to my teachers explaining like a little bit of my story. And they have done everything to make sure that I feel comfortable in class, which leads me to my 504 plan. I've worked closely with my teachers and principals to make sure that I feel comfortable in class. This allows me to be set up to have breaks if I need, if my tics are bad, to have water and snacks to make sure my tics can slow down. Tourette syndrome, 1 out of every 100 children have Tourette syndrome, but another 50% of those go undiagnosed. So there are other kids walking around the hallways of schools or something else with no explanation for why they do that. There are 400,000 middle school students in Ohio, and which means that 4,000 of them are walking around with Tourette syndrome. but more accurately, it'd be 6,000 to 8,000-ish because 50% of them go undiagnosed.
So you can see why I always say Maddie Fine's my hero. At her age, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do it. It would have been too much. So we're lucky to have people like Maddie fighting for others. And it's not just about Tourette syndrome. So I always give this speech, and Maddie and I, we were actually supposed to be in Wyoming, giving a little bit of support to some kiddos living there and to a college, a university there. But we don't hang our hat on Tourette syndrome. Tourette syndrome just happens to be our thing. You all have something. We all have something. So we always say this as we share with staff members, and we share with students, and we share with kiddos as young as elementary, is that ours is Tourette's. We want to make sure as we have this conversation that you're able to support what it is that you need. And we encourage, I'm going to wrap up with 3 things here. We encourage folks to show up for others, especially educators. We have students that are waiting for us every day to show up and be their champion. They're waiting for us to step up and support them, to protect them, to defend them. They're waiting for us to step up and admonish something that's being said. And if we don't, then it's being approved. So we strongly encourage us to show up. We talked a little bit briefly in about 25 minutes. We've had crazy amounts of people that have shown up for us, from family members to friends, to doctors, to therapists, to people that have gone out of their way. They didn't have to, but they took action out of compassion and sympathy and empathy to make sure that we were taken care of. We've shared you with stories that have been hard. Maddie talks to you about coming full circle. Her doctor told her that you're gonna do whatever you wanna do. We've come a long way. So continue to show up for others, continue to fight for those that don't have all of the resources that we've got or the privileges that we've got. So we encourage you to continue showing up and being a champion for others. This is a picture of us on the day that Maddie spoke at Capitol Hill, but this is really part of the conversation. We cannot allow others to determine the destiny of ourselves or of our students. We gotta speak in terms of what kids can accomplish, what they can achieve, regardless of their background, regardless of their circumstances. We have to lift up our students. We have to make sure that they know that they can do what it is that they wanna do, and we need to provide them with the resources to make sure that they are successful. And lastly, I'll end with compassion goes a long way. I will tell you, growing up, I used to pray Tourette's away. And I always felt there was nothing worse than growing up with Tourette syndrome. Well, I have found what is worse than living with Tourette syndrome, and it is parenting a child with Tourette syndrome. Because the pain that you know they're experiencing, and you know that they're going through, especially in 2021, things can be cruel. It's hard to be a young lady growing up in 2021. And knowing what she's going through and knowing what's coming. So sometimes it gets worse. She does an incredible job, as she mentioned, of controlling her tics. But there are moments when the medication, the therapy, and her ability to move some of her tics, it doesn't always work. And I will tell you, it's very disconcerting when you go through the grocery store. I always think of movies. We don't get to go to the movies when we want to go to movies, because we don't feel it's appropriate for us to go into a movie and make a disruption for people that paid good money. But there are times when we find ourselves in an environment where we feel we belong and we deserve to be there. And the looks of disgust that we have seen and we've experienced, we encourage people to change our mindset. I think it's important that we change the questions that we're asking. And instead of us asking questions like, why are you behaving that way? Why do you act that way? Why don't you stop what you're doing? I think if we rephrase those questions to, how can I help you? How can I better serve you? And is there anything you need for me to take that off of your plate today? I feel if we can take that mindset, I think especially in school settings, you have kids that are struggling in many areas. I think if we can change the way we approach kids or adults, colleagues that have something that's different or unique, I think it would make a much better place for success for kids and for colleagues. Speaking of compassion, Maddie Fine's going to share with you a little bit about a pledge.
So we encourage you guys to take this pledge to speak out and support others with Tourette syndrome, not only Tourette syndrome, other people struggling through different things, and help create an environment where they can feel safe and comfortable.
So we did our best to keep it at 30 minutes because we know you all have tons going on. We have some longer conversations or longer speeches that we give, but we felt that it's appropriate to try and keep this as to a minimum time limit. But please know, our contact information is here. Maddie Fine, her job as a Tourette Syndrome Youth Ambassador for the Tourette's Association of America, her job is to educate. And what we try to do with her is we try to put her in classrooms, and I work with families all the time. There are kids in my own building, in my own district, out of the state, that we work to advocate for. And we don't advocate to be aggressive. All we try to do is educate those around us. The day I was diagnosed, my counselor, and he became my baseball coach, he went into my classroom and he explained to the kids where I was. They knew what was coming. They knew there was going to be a diagnosis, but they explained that I couldn't control these things. I've done this a dozen times for kiddos that are struggling, because we feel once kids are educated, kids want to be kind. It's when it's unknown and they're unsure about what's going on, that's when that window opens for some unkindness, at least in my experience. So if you ever have a student that you're working with, and it doesn't have to be Tourette's, it could be any type of behavioral disorder or anything, we feel that educating is important, and Maddie does a great job of supporting kids at their level. And also Maddie has worked with staffs as well. There we are on Twitter. There's some website information, but we will stop there. And we can't thank you for giving us the time. We love sharing our story, and you can see why I'm a super proud dad. Maddie Fine did an amazing job. So well done, Maddie. Thank you. So I'll hand it back to you, Nikki and Rob.
Fantastic. Dr. Fine and Maddie, thank you so much for sharing your amazing and inspiring story with us all. And not only did you educate us about Tourette's, but just educating us about how to be better humans and to be better teachers and showing compassion, and just all of your highlights that you shared with us is just really amazing. So I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Are there any questions? I've been trying to look at the chat, but if there are any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, but just lots of shout outs to Dr. Fine and Maddie, and thank you again for sharing your story with us. So we really appreciate it, and it was a great information and a great story. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us for our next virtual PD session. Thanks all. Have a good night.
You.